that they were going to pay her.
She's a teacher at South Mountain High School in Phoenix, Arizona. But for former sportscaster Ann Montgomery, it's been a long, strange trip to where she is today. Growing up in New Jersey, skating became a regular part of Montgomery's routine, which would lead to her desire to be a sportscaster.
I got hooked on hockey because, of course, half the time the arena's open, there are hockey players there. And I started working with a hockey team in high school, and we had a broadcast crew. And every morning, the broadcast crew did the announcements in school. And one day I went in and said, I'd like to do the sports. And they all looked at me and they said, you can't, you're a girl. And I said, well, yeah, I can. And I was very lucky that the man who was the head of the broadcast crew was also the man who directed all the plays in our school. And so he said, well, if Annie wants to be the sportscaster, she can. And all the guys laughed at me. And the first morning I went on the air, as they announced that the sports were coming up, they played the theme from Mission Impossible. And they said, and now it's time for Big Ann with the sports. And you hear this, dun, 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 and everybody's laughing. And I went, okay, fine. And that became my theme. And I did the sports. And I decided then and there that that's what I wanted to do.
After graduating from Livingston High School, Montgomery enrolled at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, where she continued her pursuit of her lifelong dream. As a woman, she knew she was climbing an uphill battle.
Yes, it was hard because there weren't any women back then. I mean, you're talking early 80s. There simply weren't women sportscasters. Even when I wanted to be one in high school, there really weren't any that I could point to and say, gee, I want to be like her. There just weren't any. It was unheard of. Even when I was in college, the coaches wouldn't speak to me very much.
After graduating with a degree in communications, Montgomery moved to Washington, D.C., where she became a waitress.
I became a waitress there. It was a wonderful restaurant. A lot of athletes hung out there. So I got to, the Redskins always came in, and the Bullets always came in, and boxers like Sugar Ray Leonard would come in, and actors would come in. It was a wonderful place to work. But it wasn't getting me any closer to being a sportscaster. And accidentally, one day, I went to a hockey game. I went to see the Capitals play. And a friend of my aunt's was there, and he was an amateur hockey referee. And my aunt said, oh, Annie skates. And I did, of course. And he said, wow, we really need referees. Would you be a hockey referee? I said, well, sure, what do I do? And he said, well, you have to take this little course and take a test, and then you can be the referee. I said, okay, great. So I took the test, and I suddenly found myself one morning on the ice with little teeny tiny kids, you know, the kind that their jerseys are all the way down at their ankles. I went to take my first face-off, and I fell on my face. And all these little kids are staring, these little tiny 5-year-olds are staring down at me. I'm face down on the ice. I got back up. I fell 3 times taking that face off because I couldn't stop myself. And it was very funny, but I had an epiphany while I was there. I went, oh my goodness, the people that have to know the rules of the games are referees. And I decided that I would be an official in the 5 main team spectator sports: football, baseball, ice hockey, soccer, and basketball. And that would teach me the things I needed to know about the games so that I could be a good reporter. And I decided to take 5 years and do that. And that's exactly what I did. I waitressed, and my restaurant people were wonderful. They scheduled around all my games, and I ended up officiating all 5 sports. But I spent 5 years doing that. I mean, I would do a doubleheader baseball game, like at 8 and 12, 8 in the morning, 12 in the afternoon, and then I'd work a double shift at the restaurant, go in at 4 and work till 2 or 3 in the morning. I was a tired girl. I never sat down. But I believe that some news director somewhere would say, wow, this girl really knows her stuff, and that they would hire me, and that is exactly what happened.
The Braves are in Houston tonight. The Astros are leading the Braves.
Her 5-year plan had worked. In 1986, Montgomery was hired as the sports director for WRBL in Columbus, Georgia.
What do they have to do with sports? Well, nothing really.
And I threw everything I owned in a U-Haul, and I drove to Columbus, Georgia. I got there on a Monday, and they said, okay, you're anchoring on Wednesday. Well, of course, the big problem was I didn't know how to be an anchor.
The big questions now are,
her stay in Columbus lasted for 8 months. She was then hired as an anchor in Rochester, New York. 2.5 years later, Montgomery signed a deal with Channel 10 in Phoenix.
An agent called me, and I signed with him, and he one day called up and said they're interested in you in Phoenix. And I came to Channel 10, and they hired me. And so that's 2 weeks, get to Phoenix. Okay. So, I mean, you have to be rootless when you're in television. You can't, you know, it's hard to leave friends and family in some cases, but you just move.
Welcome to SportsCenter along with Mike Chirico. I'm Ann Montgomery. It was Friday the 13th.
In 1990, Ann Montgomery was hired as an anchor for ESPN, known by many as #1 in the sports media.
Well, you have to remember, ESPN then was not what it is now. I kind of wish I was there when it was funny. I would have liked to have been funny, but they were still pretty serious. My agent called, said ESPN wants you. I said, fine, where do I sign? And within 2 weeks, all I wanted to do was come back to Arizona. I was like, oh no. Unfortunately, they were, you know, there weren't very many women there either, and the women were kind of tokens. I never got to go out. I never got to be out of the studio. I just got to anchor, and that got hard. I was used to traveling around with teams and writing stories. Anchoring is not very creative. Going out and meeting someone and thinking about how to approach them and how to present their story, that's the creative part of TV, and I didn't get to do that at all.
After several years of private production, Montgomery began writing for various newspapers and magazines. In 2000, Montgomery was hired to teach in the video production program at South Mountain High School in the southern part of Phoenix.
I was used to being around high school kids, and I thought, well, you know, maybe I could be a teacher. And one day I just decided that I'd go back, and of course I had to go back to college. And I kind of lucked into South Mountain because they had a video program. So even though I'm certified to be a history teacher, they hired me to teach video originally at South Mountain, and that kind of worked well with my past.
In 2003, Montgomery published a novel called The Jerusalem Syndrome. As if teaching and officiating weren't enough, she decided to challenge herself to go beyond writing articles to produce a historical fiction. After all these years, she is still a football referee and a baseball umpire. Through it all, Ann Montgomery remains proud of her accomplishments and strives for more.
I wanted to be a sportscaster, I was a sportscaster. I wanted to be a writer, I am a writer. I wanted to be an official in the NFL. I'm too old. I can't fix that. Does that mean you don't strive to try to do things? No, you say, you know, I'm going to give this a shot. But always have a couple things that you can fall back on. I can always fall back on writing, okay? And at some point you have to go, well, I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to be in the NFL. But I can help other officials. So I think you have to just, you know, follow your dreams, but always have something to back it up with. Don't let anybody tell you you can't do something.
Live from America West Arena, where the Phoenix Suns host the Portland Trail Blazers. Welcome to the Suns Preview Show on Dimension Sports Entertainment. I'm Ann Montgomery. The hardest working member of the Suns organization right now is, without a doubt, Dr. Dick Emerson. The Suns are so besieged with injuries that they were forced to sign a 6-foot, 160-pound guard out of the Continental Basketball Association in order to have enough bodies to play Portland here tonight. The Suns were already minus their two big shooters, Charles Barkley and Kevin Johnson, when they faced the Lakers Thursday night in Inglewood, and it was a game which proved to be very costly for the Suns. At the Forum, not a big night for Danny Ainge. Thunder Dan, the feed from AC Green, good for 3, but Dan came away with just 6 points in his 46 minutes of play. Frank Johnson, however, fared quite a bit better. Frank feeds Oliver Miller, who lays it in, one of Frank's 10 assists. He also scored 23 points for Phoenix. But the Lakers were playing much better than they have of late. L.A. has only been above the 500 mark once this season. This was just after the Lakers beat the Suns in the season opener. Nick Van Exel, a tray, still Phoenix led by 5 after 1. Former Laker AC Green returned to where he played his first 8 years of pro ball. AC drives the lane for 2 of his game-leading 24 points. And all the while, he heard boos from the crowd in attendance at the Forum. The Suns stretched their lead to 10 in the half. They were up by 10. Frank Johnson finds Mark West up and over James Edwards. Still at the break, the Lakers had moved to within 5. In the second half, the Suns' old nemesis reared his head. James Worthy for the jam. Worthy scored 14 of his 22 points after the break. Kurt Rambis, who was cut by the Lakers earlier in the season, back in action for L.A. Here, the give and go with Worthy. And late in the game, Paul Westphal had seen quite enough, thank you. Paul felt that A.C. Green did not deserve a foul call, and he told the ref so. Westphal got a tee and got tossed, and the Suns were on their way to losing to a team that had dropped 16 of its past 20 games. And it is understandable that Westphal's fuse had grown so short. Earlier, he watched as Danny Ainge tripped over Sedell Freet. He came down hard on his ankle. Ainge played just 4 minutes. Dwayne Cooper also hurt his knee. The Suns went on to lose to the Lakers the final, 107-102. So the Suns not only lose their 4th game in 6 outings, they are now dangerously low in the healthy body department. Danny Ainge and Dwayne Cooper have now joined Charles Barkley on the injured list, and Kevin Johnson is still out with chickenpox and a bad ankle. So the Suns had just one healthy guard on the roster, 35-year-old Frank Johnson, and Frank will not even start here tonight. Frank prefers coming off the bench. That means a left-hander named Elliot Perry will get the call for Phoenix this evening. Perry signed a 10-day contract with the Suns this afternoon. He is fresh from Grand Rapids of the Continental Basketball Association. Now let's go out to Gary Bender and Keith Erickson for a look at what will no doubt be a very foreign-looking Suns lineup. Gentlemen?
Yes, it will, Ann, and it's the MASH unit. Wanted ankles, knees, anything right now to get a healthy ball club for this ball game tonight. There'll be 2 guys getting their first start ever in the NBA. You mentioned Elliot Perry, who started the year with Portland, was waived, and Paul Westphal feels that he can really help this club with his quickness, the ability to get his shot. Then the other guy that's going to start for the first time is Joe Courtney. He'll start at a forward spot. Courtney, as you very well know, if you've been following the Suns this year, has a very good stroke. He can shoot the ball very well. But Keith Erickson, my question is, why don't you start Frankie Johnson and Dan Marley?
Well, Frank Johnson, for a couple of reasons. One is Frank is 35 years old, and he prefers coming off the bench, and he's been playing too many minutes lately. So this way, it'll be able to cut down his minutes, bring him off the bench where he's more comfortable. Dan Marley also has been playing an inordinate amount of minutes. Courtney, on the other hand, has been a little uncomfortable when he's coming into the game later on. So Paul wants to get him in right off the bat, see if he can get into the flow and reduce Dan's minutes at the same time.
Boy, this is really a tough situation. Paul Westphal told me today at the shoot-around he feels a realistic goal is to win 2 of the next 5 games.
You know, I like Paul's attitude about this. He said, why gripe? Why complain? Everybody goes through this injury cycle, and the Suns are going through it, and they're hit very hard right now. But you've got talented players. They're professionals. You go out and you play hard. You do the best you can and see what shakes out.
I think it's interesting, Ann. We don't know what to expect tonight. How well will Perry and Courtney fare? We don't know, but that's what makes this game so very interesting. Back to you.
Thank you, gentlemen. There's more ahead, including a look at last night's lineup in the NBA, so stay with us. The Suns preview show will continue after we take a short time out. Appears that Charles Barkley and A.C. Green could be starting for the Western Conference. Final results will be released sometime next week. The NBA All-Star Game is scheduled to be played Sunday, February 13th in Minneapolis. The Lakers did not have much time to rest on their laurels after Thursday night's win over the Suns. Friday night, they paid a call on the Trailblazers, who were celebrating the return of Clyde Drexler. Drexler had missed 13 games due to an ankle sprain. He returned to Portland's lineup, scoring 11 points in 29 minutes and dishing out 5 assists. Portland had 7 players in double figures who will no doubt keep the Suns scrambling here tonight. The Blazers went on to win their 5th straight game. Elsewhere in the NBA, the Celtics whipped the Warriors at the Boston Garden. The final, 124-116. The Pistons snapped their 14-game losing streak by beating Miami 118-98. Joe Dumars scored 35 points for Detroit. Terry Mills had 34. Both were season highs. The Atlanta Hawks continue to slide. They were saddled with their 3rd defeat in 4 games, a 113-111 overtime loss to the Nets. Shaquille O'Neal blocked Patrick Ewing's potential game-winning shot with 16 seconds left as the Orlando Magic held on to beat the New York Knicks 106-103, and the big boys measured up pretty well. Shaq scored 37 points. Ewing had 36. Both had 5 blocked shots. The Bulls won their 16th straight game at home, but just barely. It was a 95-96 squeaker over the Indiana Pacers. The league-leading Seattle Supersonics overcame a slow start and slipped past the doddering Dallas Mavericks. The final there, 91-87. In Milwaukee, the Bucks beat the Charlotte Hornets 113-110. The Utah Jazz topped the Sacramento Kings 112-83 in Salt Lake. And the Cleveland Cavaliers cruised past the Los Angeles Clippers 106-90. That game, by the way, was played at the Forum in Inglewood. Monday's earthquake caused structural damage to the Clippers' home court at the Sports Arena. There's more ahead, including a player's look at some of the best dunks in recent years. So stay with us. The Suns preview show and Dimension Sports Entertainment will continue in a moment. And as we go to break, take a look at this evening's NBA schedule. Both Charles Barkley and Kevin Johnson will be out of action. However, both Danny Ainge and Dwayne Cooper have now been placed on the injured list as well. They must remain out for at least 5 games, and both are likely to need more time than that to recover from their injuries. In the meantime, forward Gerard Mustaf has been activated. Mustaf has been on the injured list for 5 games because of a sprained ankle. He is expected to see some playing time tonight. Reserve center Tim Kempton has been waived by the Suns. Kempton had been on the injured list all season due to injuries to his foot and Achilles tendon. Since the Suns are so thin at the guard department, they have signed Elliot Perry to a 10-day deal. Perry was averaging almost 14 points and over 6 assists for Grand Rapids of the CBA. The former Memphis State guard did play 50 NBA games with the Clippers and the Hornets during the 1991-92 season. Still, tonight's game could be quite a shock to his system. Let's go out to Gary and Keither, who are standing by courtside for a preview of tonight's matchup. Gentlemen?
And the Portland Trail Blazers are very quietly putting together a very fine season. They've won 5 in a row, and they're an explosive, talented team that before this year is over could win 50 to 60 games. And it's been further enhanced by the fact they got Clyde Drexler back last night.
Interestingly, Clyde missed 13 games, and they went 8-5 without him. Clyde is a 7-time All-Star, one of the most exciting players in the game. So they have missed him as a leader out there on the floor. And he played last night, his first game back, and he was a little shaky. You know, it takes a while. As we've talked about quite often, you can go through practice, you know, but it's not like being out there in the game.
One guy that has really stepped forward is Cliff Robinson. Last year, he was the 6th man of the year, but he has moved now to the starting center position, a position he coveted, and he has really picked up his play.
Well, he is sure playing well there. He's 6'10", he weighs about 235 pounds. He's very mobile. He shoots the ball. He's got a great offensive game. The problem that he has is against the big centers, Patrick Ewing and Alonzo Mourning. The big, strong guys have their way with him. But when he gets into a transition game up and down, he's one of the toughest players in the league to have to keep up with. Oliver will lose a little weight tonight if he's trailing Clifford Robinson around.
One of the surprises for Portland has been Rod Strickland. He was a problem child playing for the Knicks as well as the Spurs. But he's come into Portland, and he's really been a model citizen. He started the last 14 games.
Everybody has been so surprised at what as you say, a model citizen he has been in San Antonio. In New York, he was nothing but problems to the coach, the players, everybody. And they haven't had one problem with him in Portland. They're saying, what are you talking about? You know, that happens sometimes. A guy has come in and he's wanted to prove himself, and he has done that. As a matter of fact, Jeff Petrie was telling me he thinks that Strickland should be an all-star this year. He's been playing that well.
I guess arguably you could say that the Portland Trail Blazers are the best team never to win an NBA title in the last 4 years. They got to the finals 2 times. So this is a ball club. When they get all the pieces together, they're going to be very, very tough. And as I said at the start, quietly now they slipped into 3rd place in the Pacific Division. Back to you, Ann.
Thank you, gentlemen. For those of you who are watching on Dimension Sports Entertainment pay-per-view, we'd like to remind you to tune in immediately following the game for the backcourt wrap-up. Join me and my co-host John Cannon by dialing 514-8108. We will be ready to take your calls just as soon as the game is ended. Stay with us. The Suns preview show will be back in a moment.
Quake fans Get up on the edge of your seats and get ready for the 17th Annual Skull Bandit Racing Copper World Classic at Phoenix International.
Dear to their hearts. As we leave you now, we look to some of the best, most memorable dunks in recent years and the players who made them. For Gary Bender and Keith Erickson, I'm Ann Montgomery. We'll see you at halftime.
This week on NBA Action, we take an inside look at some of basketball's amazing stories of dunk. Not be retransmitted, reproduced, or rebroadcast without the express written consent of the NBA.
Welcome back to America West Arena, where the Phoenix Suns trail the Portland Trailblazers 58-56. Cliff Robinson has 21 points for the Blazers on 9 of 12 shooting. Cedric Ceballos leads the Suns with 18. When you consider their starting lineup, considered of among others, a newcomer named Elliot Perry, Cedric Ceballos, and Joe Courtney, the Suns are really not doing all that badly here tonight. Let's go out to Gary and Keith on the floor for a first-half recap. Gentlemen.
Well, Ann, that's a good observation. The Suns still not shooting that well. 46% in the free throw line is going to come back and be a difference.
Here comes exciting NBA action.
Is this fun for you to take a break and watch the NBA?
Shoot 9 of 12 shooting. The Suns, despite a rather odd lineup due to injuries, have hung in there so far tonight. Let's take a look at the first half highlights. Start of the game, Rod Strickland to Buck Williams, and he's stripped by the new kid, Elliot Perry. Perry finds Cedric Ceballos, and that put the Suns on the board. The Blazers had Clyde Drexler back. Drexler, a tray, making his second start since missing 13 games with a sprained ankle. Here, Joe Klein, the top of the key to Dan Marley to Joe Courtney. Courtney's shot is blocked by Cliff Robinson, and watch A.C. Green. Still Phoenix trailed by 4. Second quarter, Dan Marley, he goes behind his back, and Cedric Ceballos gets it and heads to the basket. Ceballos holds on, then finds his spot. It's a jumper from the top of the key. That cut Portland's lead down to 1. With the Suns trailing by a bucket, Frank Johnson goes up and misses an easy one. Mark Bryant grabs the rebound and the Blazers break out. Terry Porter to Cliff Robinson, the basket and the foul, but Robinson missed from the line. So the Suns were down by 4. Later, Drexler leads the break. Clyde dishes off to Robinson. He finds Terry Porter. It's good for 3. The Blazers were 4 for 4 from behind the arc at that point. Now watch the new kid again. Perry, a pass in traffic to Green underneath, and that tied the score at 47. Perry had 5 first-half assists. And if there's any question as to why they called Drexler Clyde the Glide, watch this. Clyde glides down the lane, nice and easy at the break. Again, Portland leads Phoenix 58-56. Stay with us. Second-half action is just ahead.